All right, Katie, thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, so you invited me on your podcast, and it got my wheels turning because I've never actually talked to an animal chiropractor before.
Yeah.
And we did your podcast, and I told you I was going to, my curiosity had got the best of me, and I wanted to have you on my podcast so we could just talk shop. And so I'm glad you agreed to do that. So let me ask you this. First question is sort of a layup question, but it's like, how did you, like, did you decide that you were going to do animal chiropractic when you started school, or was that something that came about later? Like, how did you even get into that?
I did actually. I knew I wanted to be an animal chiropractor actually before I started chiropractic school. I was one of those weirdos. I think we talked in my podcast. There's always that one horse girl. That was me. So I actually wanted to be a horse trainer when I was growing up. Horses actually saved me, and being around horses is very therapeutic. I don't know if any of you have done that. But after my third head injury, I was like, maybe horse training isn't the best idea for a career choice. And after my head injuries, I found chiropractic. The neurologist said, your migraine headaches are all in your head. Here's some hydrocodone. Enjoy the rest of your life. And a chiropractor actually really said, well, does anyone ever check your neck? Because your neck had some whiplash, and that's causing your cervicogenic headaches. And low down the bunny rabbit trail, here we are, a couple years later. And I became a chiropractor myself. I knew I wanted to help animals, but I didn't want to be a vet. I don't really believe in medication. I don't want to say believe. I don't believe in medication. I don't believe in chiropractic, but I just don't think that pain pills are the answer for musculoskeletal conditions. And I've always been one of those people who's really skeptical when you hear the list of side effects. I'm like, who would want to take that? So knowing that, knowing I didn't want to do surgery, like gross lab, I had a really hard time cutting up cadavers and things like that. I don't do well with blood. I don't do well with needles. There's just a lot about chiropractic that really appealed to me outside of like normal medicine. So I decided I didn't want to be a veterinarian, didn't want to be a horse trainer, and I went to a Parker open house. And at the time, Dr. Gene Giggleman was there. He had his little animal clinic. He was holding a Chihuahua, and he said, God put us on this earth to take care of his creatures. And then I had a light bulb moment. I was like, that's it. I'm a chiropractor for animals. And I just kind of pursued this path. And here I am today, able to treat a wide variety of species. And my job is never boring. Very grateful for that.
Did you know that animal chiropractic was even a thing before you did the Parker event?
No, I mean, I didn't even know chiropractic was a thing until I was about, a teenager when I was having all my, horse related injury issues. So I would say I jumped on the chiropractic bus a little late. I was in a teenager stage when I got my first adjustment. And then, through my myriad of training horses, being, horseback riding instructor and things like that, I'd always continued getting adjusted throughout that phase. And then, it was that first open house at Parker where I met Dr. Giggleman, where I was like, oh, there's
Hmm.
this whole other career path I didn't even know about. Like I didn't know it was a thing. No. And I know I hear that all the time now, and I kind of like want to vomit whenever anyone says it to me. But yeah, like it is a thing, and it works very well. And I tell all my clients, like, this is the best kept secret. It's your duty to tell everyone that this stuff works. Because I would say less than 30% of the human population gets regularly adjusted. That's in my
Yeah.
estimation. And I would say 0.0025% of animals get regularly adjusted. And it's really a shame because in vet medicine, what I'm seeing right now, with musculoskeletal cases in particular, is when a dog comes in and he's old and the pain pills aren't working anymore. Usually their options are, well, you can do a very expensive surgery that may or may not work, or
Yeah.
you can put your dog to sleep. And those are the only two answers they have for dogs with mobility issues, particularly large breed animals. And it's really a shame that, there aren't more, there's like, for humans, there's massage therapy, there's acupuncture, there's physical therapy, like there's all these different things. But traditional vet med, like I'm not hating on them at all. Some of my best friends are veterinarians, but like their toolbox is so limited for these musculoskeletal cases. And they just don't know that it's an option. And we have a lot of work to do to infiltrate and make it more mainstream.
Yeah, I mean the crazy thing is I'm coming from just a traditional chiropractic standpoint, and a lot of what you're saying, it's like your regular chiropractors would say about chiropractic, as far as like we got a long way to go, like people don't understand it, people don't, it's underutilized. And then you take what you do and you put it into like even a smaller box. I mean, it's just everything. I think that's what's somewhat fascinating to me about this whole idea, is because like I do websites for chiropractors all the time, and I'm kind of in that world. You know, I was practicing chiropractor for 9 years. So it's like there was so much of the profession that I do really understand. And then this world that I really did. There was a girl in our class that did that. She wanted to be like the horse chiropractor or whatever, but it never crossed my mind to even think about it as far as what is the practical implications of that or whatever. And so, I mean, we talked about horses. You and I have talked about dogs. Um, is that primarily what the animal chiropractors are? Is that like your wheelhouse, or is that just part of what you're doing? Like, what is the scope? Because I mean, you and I talked about the guy that was your friend that was adjusting the giraffe, you know, and there's stories of BJ Palmer adjusting elephants. Yeah. So, like, I know that it's not just dogs and horses, but is that the place where most animal chiropractors are at right now, or just talk about that?
So the big thing a lot of people think is animal chiropractic. Oh, what is this like weird small niche? It's not a niche. There's so many different species of animals. And even when you're just talking about horse chiropractic, right? You have English horseback riding, you have Western horseback riding, you have reining, cutters, you have, your hunt seat, your dressage, you have like all these different subsets. Then you have your farm animals, different kinds of farm animals. You have different types of dogs. You have agility dogs. You have pet dogs. There's so much like variance to this. And then animal chiropractic is not new. BJ Palmer actually had a clinic where he adjusted animals to prove that human chiropractic works. Petra Solward in Colorado actually has a animal chiropractic history course. It's really interesting. I think BJ Palmer had so much going on protecting the human chiropractic profession that he kind of let the animal chiropractic profession slide away from the focus. And I'm not blaming him at all. But, animal chiropractic first became a quote unquote real thing in the 1970s, where Sharon Willoughby, a vet and a chiropractor, she was a DVM-DC. She started the first school options for animals. And after that, we all just kind of fractioned off of that. I would say the first school was tailored towards horses and dogs. That is what most of the curriculum covers: horses, dogs, and to a degree, cats. It's most of your domesticated animals that you get asked to do the most. But I have a duck client that I treated last week. I have a goat patient I treat regularly. I've done 2 cows. I've done a llama. I've done a bearded dragon, a hamster. There's a lot of extracurricular homework I have to do because these
Yeah.
spines are not the same. A lot of human chiropractors think a spine is just a spine, and that's not true. Dogs actually have 7 cervicals, 13 thoracic, 7 lumbars, and 3 sacral. And their spinal cord actually goes all the way down to S1. So that's why if a dog has a disc injury, they're more likely to have paralysis and fecal incontinence to go along with it, whereas humans don't struggle with that when they have a disc problem. There's a lot of variance to the angles of the anatomy. Like a camel, for example, doesn't have a dens at C2. I did some research on that. There's just a lot of variances in the actual anatomy that you would want to know before adjusting so you didn't cause any harm. So I specialize in animals. That's all I do full time. And I would say I actually treat a lot of chiropractors animals for that reason, because they're like, I have no idea. I'm not just going to pop an activator on it and hope it gets better, because there is a lot of extra reading. The course to get trained in animal chiropractic is actually 210 hours. It was 230 when I took it, but it's 210 hours. And then you have a certification exam through the ABCA or IBCA that you take after that to prove that you're proficient, like a board exam.
So it's, I mean, because this is like really this is where my mind went from a practical standpoint. It's because like humans are humans are humans. Like there's little humans, there's big humans, but it's like the anatomy's not drastically different. I mean, it's in
I
terms
would
of
disagree with that actually, because when I was in family practice, I used to treat humans. There is a lot of differences between little humans, aka your babies, and your regular humans that are like age 5 and up, right? You have your primitive
yeah, yeah,
reflexes, you have all the different cranial bones, you know, all the reflexes you got to learn. Like there's a lot goes into treating
yeah.
little people as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that that's probably another segment of chiropractic that is um I'm always leery, and this is a total side conversation. I'm always leery of chiropractors that say they adjust kids because I like or they kind of present themselves as a pediatric chiropractor and I go, "Are you really?" I mean, it's because I know a bunch of chiropractors that adjust kids that don't uh really have any actual training beyond what I got. And it would be a far cry for me to say, like, have I adjusted kids? Yes. Have I had to look into it and do some research and study that more to be better equipped? Yeah, because school did not prepare me at all to actually adjust kids. So I'm always kind of leery of that. And I suppose I would be leery of someone if they said they adjusted animals as well. If it was just, I don't know if they're allowed to, because I'm so ignorant when it comes to this. I mean, are there states where chiropractors they're not, that they could just do it because they want to, or is there
No.
some sort of regulation on that?
You opened up Pandora's box. Across the US, there are less than 6 states that allow a chiropractor to directly treat an animal patient. You have your different subsets here where you have what's called direct access, where you do not need a veterinary prescription, referral, or supervision. You have indirect access, where you need a referral, prescription, or supervision. Or you have your direct supervision, which is exactly like it says. You have to have a vet there sitting there staring at you. I personally have not heard of a state that allows a DC to have direct access. There are states where it is not written. So I guess technically there are states where you can, as a DC, directly access an animal patient because it's not written. But across many of the states, I'm actually working on the national front with Baron Hoeg of One Chiropractic. We've been working to standardize that if you are a DC and you want to work on animals, you should have some type of training as a, bare minimum of safety and efficacy. And that bare minimum is the ABC or IBCA certification exam, proving that you did the additional postgraduate training, that's 210 hours, and took a a certification exam to prove your proficiency. There are more than 12 states right now that are directly pushing for reform on the animal chiropractic laws. But it's really challenging as a DC to practice on animals because veterinarians and the veterinary scope is the treatment of animals, and that can vary in all different colors and shades. And it is a lot of states are written that chiropractic is a human spine, like in Texas where I'm at. Chiropractic is the human spine only. So when I'm working on an animal, I'm actually seen as a vet tech working under a veterinary
Hmm,
license, and they're
interesting.
supervising me. So it's a very interesting Pandora's box that you just opened because so many animal chiropractors would love to help patients, but it can be very challenging because the veterinary referral laws.
Yeah, that's so interesting because that's from like a business and marketing standpoint, like that's where my brain goes, where I think, what does the actual business look like? Because for your average chiropractor, unless they're doing something unique like mobile chiropractic or something that's sort of out of the norm within our profession, but normally you have a brick and mortar location, people come to you, you see it's like a volume. There's like a volume money charged number that you're sort of like, the number has to make sense of like how much money you make and whatever. Like all of that stuff makes sense to me. All that stuff is normal. But then I think about animal chiropractic and I think about, obviously from a vet standpoint, I know that like people bring their small animals to vets. So it's like, it's possible to have a physical location. But then there's also, I would imagine, situations like a horse where you're not just wheeling, riding that into town or whatever and bringing it into the office. So talk to me about some of the logistics of that. If is there a physical location involved? Are you constantly on the go? Like what does your actual practice look like?
Yeah. Contrary to public belief, in Texas, we do not ride our horses to school or to work. I actually went to a trip to Europe, and that's the first question they asked me. Do you ride your horse to work? I'm like, no. Drive a car like a normal person. Anyway, sorry, I got off track there. Many animal chiropractors are mobile. That is the nature of the beast, pun intended. Horses can't really travel to you unless the person has a trailer. There are several chiropractors that do trailer to like fairgrounds or things like that. Dr. Petra does that in her state fairly effectively. Sometimes you have barn managers that will get people together and they'll host like a clinic and you'll have like several head, 8 to 10 head at one place at one time. That is very rare, I would say. Most of the house calls that I do, it's usually one or two pets at one spot with the owner present. I started out fully mobile, just like a mobile chiropractor. I had my stuff, although it was not a table and a bag. It was just a, that's really cool about my job is just my hands. I just got to take my hands with me. So I have a little bag and then my hands, and I'd go into a house or with a horse. I have a bale that I stand on, but it was really low overhead. So I actually left my human practice right before COVID, 2019. And I was really nervous about leaving my job, period. But then COVID happened. I was really worried about leaving my job. I'm like, what the hell did I just do? It was actually a great time to start a mobile practice as an animal chiropractor. I grew 4 times during COVID as a house call animal chiropractor. And I would say it's settled back down. But I got really busy and I'm very blessed. And because I have a system for how I talk to veterinarians, I built a lot of trust. And vets were happy and willing to refer to me. So through that, I kept growing and I work out of 3 different vet offices right now. And I'm actually looking at growing into my own brick and mortar space this year for small animal. And I will still travel for large, but it can look with whatever you want it to look like. Like if you're in a direct supervision state, it makes the most sense to partner with a vet and just, lease a room out of their
Yeah.
office. It's very, very easy. I've done it for 5 years myself, and it's really convenient. The vet's right there. They sign a form. You get to do collaborative care, which is awesome for the patient. Um, and then other people like the flexibility. Like I have a lot of females that have young children and they do house calls from 9 to 2 and then they're home and present with their kids. So it's a very flexible and low overhead business model. But I hate to say you can have your business your way, but as an animal chiropractor, like there's so many different ways you can do it and be successful.
So, tools of the trade. I was sort of surprised you said you just use your hands, because I've seen like videos of, I mean, it looks like a hammer and chisel as far as I know, but what is that just junk people are putting online to get clicks? Is that a practical thing that people use? Is it preference, like an activator versus using hands? Like talk to me about the tools of the trade, using hands versus something else.
Yeah. So I'm kind of a purist. If I can use my hands, I want to use my hands. I have a better appreciation of the actual adjustment getting done because animals don't
Yep.
pop like people. They're oriented horizontally instead of vertically. So they don't have gravity compressing their joints. So you won't get your typical cavitation. So if you hear a cavitation every time your animal gets adjusted, you're probably not having it done right.
Hmm.
If you have someone using a mallet, that's probably not being done correctly. If your animal is sedated, you're probably not having it done correctly. A true animal chiropractor will work with your animal. They will not force your animal to do anything they do not want to do. Um, I personally use just my hands. I do have an activator instrument I use for some animals that are like really small or frail. Like a lot of my cats will use an activator. But for the most part, I don't like gimmicks. The people you see on Instagram and YouTube, because animal chiropractic is very underregulated across the US and internationally. You get massage therapists, you get farriers, you get all sorts of lay people that watched a YouTube video calling themselves an animal chiropractor, and that is not true animal chiropractic. Animal chiropractic should be the like most boring thing you've ever watched. It should be simple, it should be gentle, and your animal should look like they're actually enjoying it. There are some distraction aids I sometimes use. Sometimes an adjustment hurts, like it's just how things go. So I do use licking mats. I have some muzzles. I oftentimes will have the owner hold their animal by their collar so they stay still. But for the most part, it's no frills. It's really like It's coming back to your roots. You get to use your hands and like that's it. You don't have any special equipment like a decompression table or anything like that. It is just chiropractic.
Yeah, that's something I was always that way when I was in practice. I didn't like using even things like if I was doing traction on the spine, like I like to grab the person with my actual hands instead of like people use towels or people use different things. Like I hated the loss of feel. When I adjusted someone, like I wanted to feel it, and I would use like drops occasionally, or I would use an activator, and it's like something like that. But I didn't like it because I always lost the feel, and I always felt like that was so important for me to know, like, is the person locked out? How much force to use? Did it move like I wanted it to? Did it move and it was sort of clunky? Are those sort of the same things that you're getting from the animals with your hands telling you kind of, is that helping you to know, did I do what I was supposed to do? Because like I don't even understand the pre and post check process for an animal.
Yeah.
Like you're not doing leg checks and you're
No,
not like doing thermal scans. Like what is that even like? Like how do you know?
no thermal scans. Haven't seen one successful with all the fur. I have had a couple of people that do thermography on animals, but they're not very accurate in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's bare bones basic chiropractic at its core. You are checking for part model. Is there pain here? Is there asymmetry here? Is there loss of range of motion, or is there tissue change? And what's really cool about animals is they have a very reliable panniculus reflex. There's a very thin muscle that lays under the skin. And when you're pushing on each segmentally, their muscle, the panniculus muscle, will actually contract and go into spasm when you push something further out of alignment.
Hmm.
And it's a very good aid to show owners. It's not like you're selling anything, it's just reproducible. If I go and I palpate like T7 and I'm trying to rotate it to the right and the panniculus reflex is going crazy, and I go down, 3 more segments, I have no panniculus response. Well, that's
Yeah.
probably a good indication of where I need to adjust. And then you can use your other, tools that you use. Let's feel the tight tissue. Let's feel if there's any heat, things like that. But it's no thermal scans. It's no fancy equipment. I usually just do my motion palpation. I do static and motion palpation. I show the owner what I'm feeling, if necessary. Like if there's something that's really hot, I'm like, feel this. If there's something really tight, I'm like, feel this. Do you see how they flinch when I touch it? For the neck, I do what are called cookie stretches. I'll put a cookie in front of the dog's nose. I'll try and get them to turn their head both ways.
Yeah.
If they have a disc problem in their neck, it usually goes lateral. So they'll have a very big deficit from one side versus the other. That is appreciable and repeatable. So range of motion with the neck, cookie stretches, and then, I do passive range of motion in the hind limbs and the forelimbs, and we check and see if they're equal from side to side. I do some orthopedic and neurologic testing as well. Not every animal chiropractor does that. But I do find that, with your hands are your greatest tool, and they're the most diagnostic asset you have in your tool belt. So why the hell are we using all these extra gimmicks in human chiropractic? I don't know why. I don't need to throw up an x-ray to sell a care plan with animals. They can't talk to me, but I can still find where their pain spots are, and I can still show the owners like, hey, we have problem areas, and all I use is my
Yeah.
hands.
Are you getting a lot of, are you getting a lot of like positive feedback, like post adjustment right away? Is that like whether it's the range of motion or you can like feel the tension easing up? Like how significant of a change are you typically seeing or want to see after you adjust an animal?
Animals are the freakingest cool thing, most cool thing ever. It's like a magic trick. You'll adjust something, they'll shake off, and you'll go recheck, and it's gone. It's
Yeah.
like right away. With humans, oh, it still hurts. But look how much more you can move, right? With animals, there's been times where I had a paralyzed dog come and see me. I adjusted it once, and it walked out of that clinic and jumped in the car. I am
Yeah.
not kidding you. One adjustment. And I told the owner, I don't know if there's anything I can do. So I look like a freaking hero. There's other pets where I do like 3 to 5 adjustments and they're like back to normal. Like it is the most amazing thing ever. There's sometimes I am dumbfounded. This shit works, right? I don't know if I'm allowed
Yeah.
to say that. But most of the time when I'm doing my post follow up, I'll always adjust And I'll always go back and recheck to make sure I didn't miss anything because animals can't tell me what's going on. So I always go back and I recheck. Or if the owner has a specific complaint, I don't usually touch feet if I don't have to because dogs don't like nail trims. But if they're like, I want you to check their toes because they're an agility dog, I'll go back and I'll check the toes, right? Um, but for the most part, owners see the change. It's immediate. Like I have one owner who's like, oh, his eyes just look so much brighter. It looks like he doesn't have a headache anymore. I have other ones who are like, wow, he couldn't sit and now he's able to sit. Like it's pretty freaking immediate and it's really cool.
There's a part of me, and I'm always kicking against the idea of you have to believe in chiropractic for it to work or anything like that. But there is a part of me that, having gone on a mission trip and adjusted people that I really couldn't communicate with all that well, and seeing how quickly some people responded in that setting versus like in the American practice setting. I do think that there's a human element that sort of just gets in the way of people getting better. And I don't know if it's skepticism. I don't know. I don't think it's belief. Like, I don't even know what it is. Cause when I went to the chiropractor for the first time, I didn't believe in chiropractic. Like, I thought the guy was a quack, and I was only there because I kind of just ran out of options, and I had headaches also. So it was just like, nothing was helping. Fine, I'll try this guy, but he's a quack. And so I don't even know what that is exactly, but I do think that there's an element of mentality that sort of just gets in the way of people doing as well as they could otherwise. And I don't exactly know what that is, but obviously that's not going to be the case with animals because they don't have that.
I have the biggest non-believers that come to me in practice, especially a lot of veterinary animals. Like if they're directly referred to me, the vet's already tried everything else in their tool belt. They have done everything, and the dog is still struggling. So I call it my island of misfit toys. Nothing else has helped. Let's try and hit a grand slam out of the park with a blindfold on, is what I tell people. But there have been cases where I said, I don't know if I can help you. And sure enough, the dog gets better.
Yeah.
So I really do believe that there is a frontal lobe problem that humans have, that animals don't, where we, are super skeptical and we don't think it's going to work. But animals don't have that. It's really cool is when the owner appreciates, like with people, we have pain, but with animals, they can't communicate their pain like we can. They hide their pain because it's fight or flight. It's survival instinct every single day. But us people, we have the more existential problems. But like when you get a skeptic owner that brings their dog in and you quote unquote fix their dog to where he's walking and he used to be paralyzed, you just sold chiropractic without having to say anything. And it's usually like immediate and in less than 3 visits. So I would say like I get a lot of husbands that like laugh at their wives for wanting to take their dog to a chiropractor. It happens all the time. And then the husband actually turns out to be my biggest fan, where he says, you need to take Fluffy and he's not looking so good. He needs to go see Dr. Katie. And the wife's like, okay. Because before the husbands will be like, oh, I gotta tell you, wasting our money on this stupid quack. Yeah. And I mean, if the shoe fits, I adjust ducks now, apparently. So apparently I'm a quack in all rights of the word, right? But, if a husband gets on board,
your patients are quacks.
Patients are quacks too. But like if I can get the husband on board after they see the results of chiropractic, I've had people that do both human and animal chiropractic. A lot of times that's the gateway. They see their dog get better, then they want to try chiropractic. Yep. And that's probably the greatest thing when that happens, because I think more people would be happier people if they got adjusted more regularly.
I had a lot of dudes that came into my practice, and I never really even realized that or considered it until I had a chiropractor that came into my practice that was just somebody I knew, and they were just sort of there, and they asked me the question. They're like, how come there's so many dudes in the practice? Because like so many chiropractors are like full of, it's all women, women and kids. And I wouldn't say my practice was primarily men, but there was a lot. And to me, it was like, I always encouraged the skeptic. I never minded the skeptic because I never overpromised anything. Like I was always very level-headed when I came to patients. And I actually really enjoyed someone that was was kind of at the end of the rope that was understood like what the approach was we were going to take, because I think that that's probably where vitalistic chiropractic can really thrive, is when you have people that they have tried everything. They're kind of done with the stuff that makes the most sense from like our kind of standard worldview. And then you say, well, listen, if you've done all those things and it hasn't worked for you and you don't really know what else to do, why don't we try this? Like, why don't we give your body a chance? Now, you and I would argue that I would assume that they probably should have done it to start. Like that should be like the starting point, but that's not where people are at. Like people are at now where they want to do the pills, they want to do this, they want to try all this stuff. And then when they're done with that, I always liked those people because I didn't overpromise. I was just like, hey, we're going to try to get your body back online. We're going to try to see if we can get it to work better, see if we can get it healing itself, see if we can get it functioning better. And it was always amazing to see that, where it's like those people that have done everything, tried everything, and then you're just touching them with your hands. You know what I mean? Like you're just moving bones and you're just getting them moving right and getting them functioning better. And all of a sudden their body comes back online. Like it's one of the things I tell chiropractors all the time. It can be very, very difficult to make a living as a chiropractor, and it can be very difficult. The profession can be really hard, but it rewards you in that way, like that, like emotional way, and seeing a difference in someone's life. And in your case, like, an animal's life, and also the human's life that have these animals. It rewards in that way in spades, like so far above and beyond what a lot of professions do. And I think that's probably one of the most amazing things about being a chiropractor.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of human chiropractors that leave treating humans to work on animals because of how rewarding it is. Because everyone knows this, insurance rates are not going up, the reimbursement. And I feel like to keep making our break even point, we oftentimes will look at the next new shiny thing. Should I add a shockwave? Should I add a laser? Like, what cash pay services can I add to make this chiropractic thing work? And I'm not BSing you when I tell you I have a 2 to 3 week wait at all times, and all I do is chiropractic. Is straight chiropractic. Sometimes I add in some additional modalities, but it is not the main thing I'm known for. I don't do any marketing. I only go off of referral and word of mouth. People find me from all the corners of the internet, and there's so few of us. In our Metroplex, I was talking to you about this. There are less than 20 animal chiropractors in all of Dallas-Fort Worth. Probably Dallas. I think there's more. In Fort Worth because that's where all the horses are. But people will find you, they'll seek you out, and they want what you have because what you specialize in animal chiropractic. They don't just want to take their dog to any Joe Schmo if he's paralyzed and peeing all over himself. They want someone who's done this before. And I have people that find me just for that. And I never overpromise. I always tell them if we're going to see results, about 4 to 6 visits. And I don't really, I have owners, they laugh at me because I'll say, I want to see them in 4 weeks. And they're like, actually, I would rather come back in 2 weeks. And I say, okay, I'll take more of your money. You're not going to have to argue with me about that. I'll see Fluffy in 2 weeks. Do you need it? Yeah. No. But if you want it, like, great. I don't have to sell chiropractic. And I think that's what burnt me out of human chiropractic, because I worked in a high volume insurance model where we had scripts and we had to show them x-rays and we had to do the scans and we had to sell them a $5,000 care plan for us to be, to get our bonus. And I hated that. I wanted it to be patient centric, and now I get to do that. And I feel like I'm being rewarded not only in the results I get to see, but also in the, amazing bond I have with the owners, because they keep coming back and they keep choosing wellness and preventative care for their animals, and I don't have to sell it to them. So
I'm curious about finances, and obviously you don't have to tell me how much money you make, but it's at what type of volume are we talking about? When you say you're out for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, it's like, some chiropractors, they're seeing 30 people a week. Some people are seeing 100. Some chiropractors are seeing 500 people in a week. Like, so what it means to be busy for a chiropractor kind of depends on what are they doing? How much time are they spending? How much money do they charge? What is I mean, I can't imagine it's like a joint situation where you're charging $35 a visit for, you know what I mean? Like I can't, like that doesn't make any sense to me. So like what is, talk to me a little bit about like patient volume, like typical charges, things like that. Like just the business side of what you do as a chiropractor that's adjusting animals.
Patient volume is never going to be like it is for human chiropractic. You
Sure.
can't tell a dog or a horse to lay on a table and shut up and lay there. It's just, it doesn't work that way. Especially for horses, you have to respect them. They can kill you at any given moment. If they don't like what you do, they could seriously injure you. You have to work with them. You do not tell them what to do. You ask and you politely ask,
Yeah.
especially if it's, a really big horse with an attitude problem. But for dogs, I never want a dog to be uncomfortable. I don't want to hold them down with a muzzle and, three people holding them still so I can pop their
Yeah.
back. Like that is not what chiropractic. They should be excited to be there. So my first visit, I spent about 40 minutes with every new patient, sometimes up to an hour, hour and a half if they're really, really nervous or anxious. And then an established patient appointment, I do 20, 30 minutes. I know a lot of human chiropractic visits when I was doing in office and high volume, I had a 5 to 8 minute appointment. That was my max. And I do a 20-minute appointment. It's much different. It is much lower volume, more boutique style. I know some people call it that, boutique style. But I don't want an animal to ever feel rushed. And I do charge accordingly for that. So it is a higher amount from a $35 joint adjustment. Yeah, it's like double or triple that, depending on geographically where you're at. And then you have to also factor in drive time. There's some times where I drive, up to an hour just to see a handful of pets, and I drive home.
Yeah.
So
That's what I was going to ask you. Is
yeah,
that the fee change based on where you
yeah.
have to go?
So I don't charge a travel fee if they come to me, obviously. But if I drive to see them, I do it in a radius. Not everyone's like this, but I do 0 to 10 miles, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to
Yep.
40.
Keep it
And
simple.
you just keep it simple. I don't charge by mile. I know some people that do that, but I only charge one way. If you're in that radius, I charge you that capped rate. And then for horses, I just drop that altogether because it is just such a crapshoot. So I just charge a deposit up front where it's $50 per head of horse. You pay up front before I ever show up. And that's your quote unquote travel fee. And then I waive it after a certain amount of animals. But it really depends on your time. I had to tell a lot of animal chiropractors this because we are such giving people, is that if I drove an hour to treat one dog, I said no to three dogs in an office,
Yeah.
right? So you're always saying no to somebody, even when you feel like you're saying yes to everybody. And you could be saying no to your family, right? If you're driving an hour for one horse or one dog, well, that's time you could be with your family or catching up on notes or admin. So you do have to be very, very good at time management, and also traffic, is another thing I deal with a lot. So I don't try and do appointments nights or weekends because I try to not sit in traffic if I don't have to. I don't do appointments past 4 p.m. because I just don't want to sit in Dallas traffic. Um, that's highly variable based upon every animal chiropractor's break even. I don't know what your time is worth. Maybe you're only worth $1 a minute. Maybe you're worth $5 a minute. It really depends on the value you bring to the appointment. I do a full visit. I don't just adjust. I actually talk about home exercises I want them to do, whether it be massage or stretching. I talk about home ergonomics. If I'm in their house, I'll say, you see slick floors and Fluffy can't feel his feet. Well, let's talk about adding some grips or some runner rugs. Or I'll walk around the property if it's a horse and I'll say, do you see this? Do you see how he's standing in his stall? He's parked up in this one corner because he's trying to alleviate pain and his hooves are his low back. Like there's things that I do that other people don't do, that it's the small finer details that add up when you're trying to take good care of an animal, and you just can't replicate that in a 5 minute appointment.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm fascinated by the whole thing. I think that it's very interesting. I think it's probably more, needs to be discussed, probably more than I even was aware of 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Let me ask you this. I have a couple random questions. Is one, do you remember your first time you adjusted an animal?
Um, It's been a while. But my first adjustment I actually did was on my cat. My cat was actually my best chiropractic patient, and my cat was on Baytrail injections like once or twice a year because she'd have reoccurring UTIs.
Hmm.
And the vet could never get her UTIs under control. And I started taking her to Dr. G, Dr. Giggleman. And what really stood out to me that no other vet had ever talked to me about is how restricted she was in her lumbosacral junction. She, like, her tailbone was all the way off to the right. And he asked me, what kind of litter box do you have? What kind of food are you feeding? And he asked me questions that no one had ever asked me. And so I know this is getting a little bit off topic, but after I got her treated by Dr. G, I eventually took the course and she was my practice animal because that's what I had available. I had a cat
Yeah,
in
sure.
chiropractic school. And the very first adjustment I did to her tailbone, it like popped back into place. It was the weirdest because animals usually don't cavitate, right? And my cat didn't really, she wasn't like a touchy feely kind of cat. She was like, would exist, but wouldn't want to be cuddled.
Yeah.
And after I started taking over her care and adjusting her, she started actually hopping my lap when she wanted me adjusted. She'd
Hmm.
look at me and sit on my lap and say, "Hey, excuse me, peasant, I need an adjustment." So after that first time of like having that experience of like feeling that, and then also she'd get really restricted up in her neck, and I do some traction for her neck, like having like that bond with her was something we had never shared. And I had that cat her whole life ever since she was a kitten, and she never started quote unquote loving me until I was able to ease her pain.
Hmm.
So she was like in her, later stretches of life, she's like 12 or 13 at the time. And I changed her litter box to it was top entry at the time, and I changed it to I call it the bean, where it's like an igloo. They walk up into it and turn around, so it's a ramp. I changed her litter and I changed her food, and she never had another UTI ever again. I never had to give her shots. She hated getting shots. She hated going to the vet, and we were able to manage her condition at home. And that
Hmm.
was really special. That was really special for me and for her because it strengthened our bond. And it was really cool to be able to like feel things move in an animal where, in class, I always tell you, probably won't feel anything, probably won't hear anything. So, did you do anything? Is the argument. But like, I felt it that day and it was pretty cool.
I always think it's great to help your loved ones. Like that's it's such an amazing thing. Like my dad was I started doing upper cervical like later in chiropractic college. I was interested in upper cervical, and my dad was the first person I ever adjusted on a knee chest table.
Oh, wow.
And he was very skeptical of chiropractic. My mom was the one that was very rah chiropractic, and my dad had gone through chemotherapy when my earliest memories of my dad when I was 4 years old was visiting him in the hospital because he had cancer, and he had numbness and tingling in his hands and feet ever since then from the chemo. And they just kind of said, it's permanent.
Yeah.
And he started letting me adjust him just because he was sort of fascinated. My dad was an engineer and he was fascinated with the concept of upper cervical. And so I started adjusting him, and the numbness and tingling in his hands and feet went away. And
That's special.
he was just, it's probably the thing, like the thing that I go, I'm not a chiropractor anymore. I spent a lot of money to become a chiropractor. It's like and I sit there and I go, if I did and I'm going to tear up. Like if I did all that just to help my dad,
Yeah.
it's like,
It's worth it then.
that's something. And it really meant a lot to me, and probably the most, like my most amazing thing for me personally is that, because I remember when I was a kid, I remember like helping my dad in the garage, like work on the car, and he would drop tools because of his hands and he would get so frustrated. And just to be able to help him with that,
Yeah.
it was probably, 10 years before he passed away, where he just didn't have that issue anymore. Like that's awesome. And I always think it's great to have those little things where the people you love, you get to see that you make a difference in their life. Like and I know that sometimes your loved ones, the human loved ones, can be the biggest pains in the butt when it comes to being patients.
Yes.
But when you can genuinely help them and you get to see that, it's such an amazing thing.
It is. And I would say you would have that tenfold if you were an animal chiropractor, Dr. Jerry, because there's people that have brought their animals to me, and I had this chiropractor bring me her dog named Jackson, and she said, "This is Jackson's last Christmas." And I looked at her and I said, "Oh, okay. So that's like 3 months from now. Well, what do you want me to do? Right?
Yeah.
You've already decided." And she's like, I want you to do what you can to make him more comfortable." And I treated Jackson. He could hardly stand. He was incontinent. Like he was dragging his feet around. They were bloody on the top. He was a mess. And Jackson actually had three more last Christmases. He
Wow.
lived 3 years past his expiration date. And his vet was like, "I have no idea what that quackadoodle Dr. Katie is doing, but keep doing it." And when Jackson finally did pass, she sent me a beautiful picture of him in front of the Christmas tree. She said, "Thank you so much for giving me 3 more years. You're my best friend." And that happens all the time. You don't think of how much our animals mean to us, their family members, especially now. I feel like more people are getting dogs instead of having children. And like, you can't ever put a dollar sign on more time with your best friend. And there's been several owners where I personally didn't feel like it was fair for me to adjust them and improve their mobility so they would be around longer, but that wasn't my call to make. It was what the animal owner needed at that time. And there's been several dogs where they lived 2, 3, 4 more years because they kept getting adjusted and they had better mobility. And that is a true blessing to be able to give that to people, even if you may not agree with it, because those those animals could be their family member to them. Like that could be something very special, and they're not ready to let go. And you're able to facilitate keeping that animal comfortable in their golden years. So like that is something that has been, I didn't realize getting into animal chiropractic. I'm kind of a sports person. I like sports. I was a horseback rider. I like to do it at competitions and stuff like that. And like I always thought chiropractic for animals was performance optimization, especially for horses. They
Yeah.
have a job, right? But like through COVID, I actually got a lot of pet animals because the owners didn't know what else to do. They couldn't get an appointment with their vet. And I started treating a lot of, golden oldies is what I call it. And it was so special. It wasn't what I thought, but it was so special to be able to enable these companion animals to have, more time with their owner. And that's something that I still like. I get really emotional about it because, like, what a blessing that is. If I hadn't gone to school for this, like, this dog would have been euthanized 6 months, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, you know?
So when you say there are times where you don't agree with it,
Yeah.
does that mean that there are times where you think that it's not best for the animal to keep going, or
Yeah.
like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so every owner is different, and compassion fatigue is a very big problem we have in animal chiropractic because you'll see some of the worst of the worst. I had a dog once that wasn't able to walk, wasn't able to potty on his own, and he had cancer everywhere. But his it was a lab. Labs keep going, right? And they'll keep eating and they'll keep acting happy. So this dog was a lab mix, and um, he couldn't do all those things, and I thought it wasn't fair for his owner to have to lift and carry him everywhere and help him potty, and they literally had to turn him so he wouldn't get bed sores. But because he was still eating, they kept him around.
Hmm.
I didn't think it was fair. I told him multiple times, like, I'm happy to keep coming, but like, I don't think this is a good quality life, and we need to reassess how he's doing. But he had an oral melanoma that started growing, and then he finally stopped eating, and then they were ready.
Hmm.
But I thought he was ready 6 to 8 months prior to that. And it's never my place to tell someone to put their best friend to sleep. But there are times in the back of your head where you're like, I don't think this is fair. I don't think I should be adjusting this dog. It feels kind of like you're prolonging their suffering, and like I don't like my way of living to be tainted. Like I always want to put the patient first and their ultimate comfort first, and sometimes that could be euthanasia. So I have a big heart for those veterinarians that do house call euthanasia. What a blessing and gift it is to be able to end someone's suffering. We don't do that with people. um, but yeah, like sometimes people, that's how they use animal chiropractic is they want to extend time with their best friend, whether it be right or wrong. Like you sometimes have to compartmentalize about that.
So I was curious about, you had said that some of the animals being like, obviously a horse can hurt you. The dogs, like you don't want to have people hold them down. When an animal's nervous, when an animal's aggressive, when an animal is not wanting to be touched or whatever, is it a situation of just working with the animal until you can? Is it a situation where sometimes you have to like come back? Is there a situation where sometimes it just can't be done? Like what do you see with situations like that where animals are not being compliant with what you want to do?
I have had animal patients I dismissed because I thought that the upset of me forcing them to do something wasn't worth the benefit of the care. So I told the owner, like, yeah, we can adjust them, but they're so stressed out. I don't think it's worth it to them.
Yeah.
And I usually refer them for something else that's less invasive, such as like laser therapy or acupuncture or something that's not going to be as stressful as someone punching your back, you know? I would say most animal patients don't have a problem as long as there's food involved or something they like involved. So I get a long way with treats and licking mats and things like that. Horses is a different story. I took a lot of my horseback riding experience and my horse training experience and extrapolated that to where you have to know animal behavior and you have to know when enough is enough. There is definitely a less is more property when working with horses. I know as chiropractors, we're like, we want to get all the things, we want to make sure it's a good adjustment, but sometimes like just 2 or 3 segments can have a big impact. Some horses, if they're getting really upset, I'm like, let's just leave it at that today. We'll come back and we'll do more the next time. And you just have to build trust with the animal in front of you. Sometimes you have to learn stuff that's not chiropractic. I've picked up a lot of massage techniques from my canine massage therapist. So if they're not enjoying the physical thrust of the adjustment, I'll go back and I'll just massage them for 5 minutes and we'll just take a break and then I'll go back to the chiropractic. But knowing how to read the animal in front of you is probably the hardest part of the field. Like when I started, I knew horse language, but I didn't know dog language. So I have a colleague that's a dog trainer who kind of took me under his wing and he said, hey, did you know when a dog does this, it means that? I'm like, no, I did not. So yawning and licking is not always a good thing. In horses, it usually is. For the most part, pinning the ears back and eyes wide, that's pretty generic across dogs and horses. They're not liking what you're doing, but like the nuance in behavior is really important. And that's why it's really important for me that people go to a certified animal chiropractor, because we do have behavior in our coursework, and your typical chiropractor may not have that, and they may not know when they're doing too much and it's stressing the animal out. And as you, like, I've had people that took their animals to other people and they come and see me and they're like, wow, he actually likes coming here. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, he was always scared of the other person that adjusted him. He'd always try and run out the door after the visit. And I'm like, well, he probably wasn't considering your dog's feelings and was trying to force him to be adjusted. And I don't ever want to be like that. I want your animal to have a good time when they're here. I want them to wag their tail and, be happy at the end of their appointment. I don't want them fearful. Now, I will say there's caveats to that. There's some dogs that will never like me, like Chihuahuas or cats. But knowing when enough is enough is probably the hardest thing that I'm still learning. So
my in-laws have a little Yorkie that isn't my biggest fan. Or some kind of Yorkie type dog. I don't even know what he is. He looks like a Yorkie to me, but he does not like me at all. I seem to be the one person that he dislikes greatly, because anytime I walk in, he just barks and barks and barks and barks and barks. He loves my son, and the little 10-month-old and him apparently are best friends. So I guess I can't get rid of him after all, because I always walk in and his name's Ben. I was like, Ben and I are not friends. Like, we're not friends, but apparently Jude and Ben are best friends. And so I guess he gets a pass because my kid likes him. So let me ask you this before we finish up. Weirdest animal that you've adjusted, that you've worked on?
I mean, I think the weirdest I've done was a llama. I didn't enjoy the experience. The llama didn't enjoy the experience, so it probably won't happen again. But I mean, if here's the problem, if I'm one of those like bleeding heart people where if you cry on the phone, I will probably come out to see you because I know
Yeah.
how much that animal must mean to you for you to call an animal chiropractor. Like by
Yeah.
the time they call you, they've usually tried several other things and they're
They're desperate.
desperate. So I will say, like, I have a bucket list. I still haven't done a pig, although I got a call about one the other day. I haven't done a sheep. I haven't done like any parrots or anything. I think that'd be really cool. I saw a video
Mm.
of another colleague of mine doing it. I'm like, oh, that looks really cool. Of course, we always say that, and then it happens. We're like, it's not cool. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I am perfectly fine doing horses and dogs and cats and just your typical animal chiropractic. But yeah, llama was probably the weirdest. And then a bearded dragon was probably like my most exotic because it was a reptile. And I
Mm.
didn't know this, but they only have four cervical vertebrae, so it felt really stiff in its neck, and now I know why. So, anyway, there's so much variance, and like I have so many anatomy books for animals now. It's insane.
Yeah, that's such a strange it's such a strange thing because you're I would imagine you have a baseline amount of information, but you would find yourself in situations where that first pig call, that
Yeah.
first, sheep call, it's
Yep.
like you got to go like let's go grab the book. Let's kind
Yeah.
of get familiar with what's going on here cuz
Yeah.
you're not going to know as much as being familiar with having your hands on a dog or a horse or something
Yeah.
that you're more used to.
Yeah. Thankfully, there's some amazing courses now that are coming out for CE for like farm animal adjusting. And I haven't made my way over there yet, but I have a collie that all she does is cows. She does steers, show steers, and like that is most of her business in the spring. Like all she does is cows.
Hmm.
I would never want to do cows all day. I don't really like cows, but like it's amazing to me that we can have all these niches within what's already supposed to be a niche, right? So people all the time are like, oh, animal chiropractic, what niche? I'm like, there's just so many different types of animals. I feel like it's really a Pandora's box that you're just waiting to open it. You just have to choose what type of animal lights you up and, do more of that.
So what do you foresee like if you could pick like one thing that was like this is the thing that if we could do this it would become more known, it would be better. Like what's the thing if you could like flip a switch and it's like you know how do people become more aware of this? Like how does this happen? Like how does it go from where it is, where it's like even chiropractors like me who like I'm in chiropractic, like I'm deep, and it's like and I'm sitting here like an idiot being like, oh, I don't know, like I don't I don't know anything. It's like how does it go from that to the average person knowing that this is just as much as an option as their vet is?
I don't really have an answer to that for you because I feel like it's multifaceted. I feel like a lot of people that get regularly adjusted want chiropractic for their animals. So if more people got adjusted by chiropractors, I feel like they would choose chiropractic for their animals. But I also feel like there's a really big gap in knowledge as far as vet knowledge, like going to vet school. There's so much veterinarians have to learn that, like, learning about what they call alternative care. I hate being called alternative care. That just, I'd rather the word complementary care. But they don't have any exposure to alternative care in vet school unless they take an extra course or, um, what do they call them? Additional courses that they add on at the end there.
An
Um,
elective.
yeah, yeah, an elective. So unless they take an elective, thank you, they're not exposed to it. Like a lot of vets come out and they're like, ooh, acupuncture. I want to do dog acupuncture. But like I think it's just it's like a buzzword. Like shockwave is chiropractic right now. Ooh, shockwave, it's a new thing. Like acupuncture, ooh, it's a new thing. Like I don't want us to be a fad, but I really think if we were to become kind of better at being collaborative and better at how we talk. I'm not against vitalism, but I don't use the word subluxation when I talk to a vet. put me on a cross and crucify me. I use the word misalignment. But I think if we were better at talking in vet language and talking about what their goals are, like, hey, do you ever have a patient that doesn't respond to pain medication and the owner doesn't want surgery? Raise your hand. All of them are going to raise their hand and you say, I can help those people.
Yeah.
Because that is really what we thrive and what we do well. And if we're able to paint ourselves as a solution to these problems for veterinarians, I really feel like the collaborative care, that switch will be flipped to where we're not scary. We're not these voodoo witch doctors that are like waving crystals around and, all these weird things they think we do.
It almost sounds to me like the pathway to the pathway to more people being aware of this is the vets, where it's like a twofold thing. Like,
Yeah.
one is if chiropractors are aware that this is this should be more readily done,
Yeah.
at least they can refer. So it's like, not that every chiropractor should do it, but chiropractors could let their patients know
Yeah.
as part of the education process that, hey, this is also something that pets, for pets, and here are the benefits and here's some information.
Yeah.
So chiropractors could be helping, the cause, but if it requires a referral from vets, ultimately that's the doorway. Like, where if there's a way to have it, to start educating vets on a broader scale, of the benefits of it and how it does help them help their people.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing about even medical doctors. Like, I've told chiropractors, it's like, what, like chiropractors that have this animosity toward the medical profession and don't see them as our brothers and sisters in the healthcare, you're creating a barrier. And then you're saying, like, well, why don't they refer to me? It's like, well, because you're a jerk to them.
Yes.
And you talk crap about everything that they do. It's like, why don't you offer to help them with some of the stuff that they don't know what to do with? Like, why don't you take something off their hands instead of criticizing everything that they do? And I think chiropractors have a very dumb approach to networking when you get into like the vitalistic space, because they're adversarial as opposed to saying, like, hey, you do you, but there's a bunch of things that you're not good at that I can help with.
Yep.
And if we could figure out a way to educate vets on kind of a broader scale on how chiropractic fills the gaps in the areas that they're most deficient, I think that would be an interesting thing.
I'm going to open a can of worms here too and say, like, a lot of chiropractors are vitalistic or holistic, and I raw feed my dog, but do I tell every client of mine, hey, you need to raw feed your dog because it's what's best for your dog? No, I don't do that. It's not my place to do that. That is what a vet should be talking to their clients about, is their food and their shots and their parasite prevention. I don't want to do any of that. I specialize in musculoskeletal care for animals. It is not my place to take over primary care. And that's kind of the problem with animal chiropractors, is we're used to being primary care providers where we talk about all these different facets, but like, I have no business talking to people about vaccinating their dog. I don't know anything about it. And I think a lot of animal chiropractors get in this quasi, vitalistic, holistic space where we want to talk about all the things, but it's stick with what you're good at. Leave the rest for the veterinarian. You don't have to do all of it. You are very good at doing just the adjustment. With animals, like, they can have a team of providers. Just like humans, they can have their heart doctor, and then they can have their primary care and their dermatologist. Like, you are just a piece of the team. You don't need to be the whole enchilada for that person. And I know a lot of animal chiropractors don't always agree with me, and I sometimes step outside of my bounds when I just can't shut up because the dog needs more help, right? I will say, here's some resources for you to read. But I have to toe that line because working together with veterinarians has really opened the door for my practice. I actually have an online course for other animal chiropractors about that. Here's how to talk to vets, so that way they know you're a friend, not an enemy. And they're our greatest partners in helping these animals. And there's a vet shortage right now. They need our help. They just don't know it yet.
Is there, I feel like there's so many things that we could talk about, but I wanted to just kind of leave it open-ended at the end. And just, is there anything that you feel like you wanted to say or talk about that we haven't specifically talked about up to this point before we finish up?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the time people, like, especially DCs, get into animal chiropractic because they think it's just one more thing they can add, just one more tool. They just want to add it as like an ancillary thing they do. Don't do that. It's really important to me that the people that take care of our animals be good at what they do. Because right now, the whole profession of animal chiropractic is under microscope glass. 12 states trying to push their laws forward. Like, it's really important that we have some good actors, not some bad apples, representing our field right now. So, if we're under the microscope, it's really important that we have people that are dedicated to being the best of the best and that are interested in collaborative care, not being on their own island and being antagonistic to these veterinarians that are also trying to take amazing care of these animals. So, it's really important to me that you not just seek out animal chiropractic as a profession if you want to dabble in it. Please be dedicated if you are going to seek out this profession. Please talk to veterinarians. Don't just do your own thing on an island in your office. Your vets are your best allies when it comes to moving these laws forward. So it really benefits you to talk to them and to be a good authority figure, a good leader in your community of what animal chiropractic should actually look like. Am I the best? No. But I really feel like there's such a discrepancy in communication styles and what we think we should be doing scope wise that, it's really important to me that we have some people that are willing to stand up and be good characters for this profession as it moves forward.
Boy, I tell you, you hit on one of my soapboxes for chiropractic in general.
Yeah.
And that is, if you're going to do it,
do it well.
Do it well. Be committed to doing it well, because, and I'm not saying you have to be great at it the first time you try it, because none of us are. But if you're going to do, I don't care if it's shockwave or acupuncture or whatever you're doing. I don't care if it's rub-a-dubs. I don't care if it's ultrasound. I don't care. I used to be very particular about what chiropractic is because I was in the upper cervical world, and anything below C3 was a dirty mixer. And, I listen, I have been the most narrow-minded chiropractor in the past. I'm not that way anymore. I'm just not. I see there's so many things that chiropractors do that are beneficial that are not even technically chiropractic. But for God's sake, if you are going to do it, be good at it. We have an epidemic of poor quality in our profession. I don't care if it's animal chiropractic or old people, young people, fat people, skinny people. I don't care who you're taking care of. We have an epidemic of poor quality. And in a perfect world, if I could flip a switch and make something happen, if I could just make the chiropractic profession known for excellence, that would be the thing. Because if people knew that whatever that chiropractor says they do, they're good at it, or at least they're trying their best to be good at it, that would be a heck of a thing for our profession to be known for. And we just aren't right now. We have there's just, like I said, an epidemic of sloppiness in our profession. It doesn't need to be that way in the animal world either.
And I feel like sloppiness can be with your customers, your clients too. If you actually want to do chiropractic, you should actually like animals. You should actually care about the animal. You should not want to force an adjustment. You should want to look into how you can learn their behavior and how you can use fear-free methods, or what they call it, so that way you can have a good quality experience. So that way the animal and the owner's first experience with animal chiropractic is the best possible thing. I want owners to be like, wow, my dog actually liked the chiropractor. That's pretty cool. I want you to actually care about animals, and I want the clients you treat to see that. And I want that to be your legacy when they go back and they talk to their vet. That is probably the best sales piece, is excellence.
Well, Katie, I have had fun. I've enjoyed the conversation. Let people know where they can find you or where they can connect with you. Tell them about your podcast before we wrap this up.
Yeah, so I'm actually a practicing animal chiropractor full time, but apparently I have too much time on my hands because I started a podcast because people kept calling me, how do you run your business? And I was tired of answering the phone and answering the same question over and over again. So I started to start a podcast, and the podcast grew into a Facebook group because I was kind of shouting into the void and people had follow-up questions. So started a Facebook group, and then that merged into me having an online course. And God's kind of leading me where he wants me to go. But like, it's a real passion project of mine to create excellence in the animal chiropractic profession. And so now I have a podcast, Making Strides for Animal Chiropractic. I have an online course called the Business Basics course. It's literally the foundation you need to grow as an animal chiropractor, and is particularly tailored to DCs that want to start their practice because of the vet referral piece. It's how to build relationships with veterinarians, how to talk to them, and how they can receive the message of chiropractic without you having to talk about vitalism and subluxation theory and everything like that. I'm kind of a no-nonsense person. I've done a lot of the things that don't work. So that's what I talk about on my podcast. I've done this. This does not work. And as an introvert myself, I can't stomach going to vendor booths. I can't stomach trying to talk to 1,000 people to sell them on animal chiropractic, because when I did do that, they would always ask me, "Oh, animal chiropractic, I didn't know that was a thing." And I just wanted to bang my head against the wall. So instead of that, I created a program for other introverted animal chiropractors that want to grow their practice without having to do all the hard work of sitting there and selling chiropractic. Because I don't think you should have to be a salesperson in order to be a good chiropractor. So that being said, that is me. Podcast again is Making Strides for Animal Chiropractic. We have all of our materials on makingstridesforanimalchiropractic.com. I'm super blessed if you guys decide to move forward and listen to those materials. I'd love to introduce you guys to the exciting world of animal chiropractic. It is the greatest job in the entire world.
Hey, this has been fun.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. I'm glad you came on. I'm glad we did this. I'm glad you reached out to me. And we'll talk again soon, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.